Welcome to Adu Globe. Discover new ideas, learn exciting things, and be amazed every day. In the silent tree lines of eastern Ukraine, the ground suddenly erupts with fire and thunder. A US-made Bradley fighting vehicle storms forward, unleashing a storm of 25mm rounds that tear through Russian troops hiding in cover. This isn't just an ambush. It's a brutal display of dominance, where speed, armor, and firepower collide in a single devastating moment. The battlefield shakes, the tree line burns, and in those few seconds, the Russian soldiers are scattered in chaos. What you're about to see is not just combat footage, it's the raw edge of modern war, where a single machine can decide the fate of dozens. On the map, it may appear as nothing more than a small dot, a rural village called Voron, or more accurately, Vorono, in the Dnipropetrovsk region of Ukraine. Yet in war, even the smallest settlements can become decisive stages where history is written. Surrounded by open fields and narrow tree lines, this village serves as a natural barrier, a gateway that both sides are desperate to control. For Ukrainian forces, holding ground here means protecting vital supply routes and keeping pressure on advancing Russian units. For Russia, capturing it could provide a stepping stone to push deeper into contested areas. Every street, every farmhouse, every tree line can transform into a defensive line or deadly trap. What seems like an ordinary village in times of peace has, under the weight of war, turned into a battlefield where strategy, geography, and survival collide in brutal clarity. Russia's vision stretches far beyond the trenches of Donetsk. Their narrative speaks of a horizon that reaches into Dnipropetrovsk, a vast expansion that would redraw the map of this war. Recent reports of skirmishes and clashes in nearby sectors give weight to this claim, showing that Moscow's ambitions are not empty words but active prose. For Ukraine, this makes every frontline not just a local defense, but part of a national struggle to block an enemy intent on pushing deeper. What may look like a distant threat could quickly shift into a pressing reality. To resist such ambitions, Ukraine turns to units that carry both experience and reputation. The 225th Separate Assault Regiment has been branded as an elite force, a label earned through grueling combat. These soldiers are not anonymous. They are portrayed as skilled, disciplined, and determined, a spearpoint of Ukraine's resistance. In war, perception matters. To call a regiment elite is not only to describe capability, but to create an identity that inspires allies and unsettles adversaries. When the 225th moves into position, the message is clear: Ukraine will meet aggression with professional, battle-tested fighters. The spotlight now shifts to the Ukrainian 225th Separate Assault Regiment, a unit often described as elite. This reputation is not just about advanced weapons or tactics, it's about the identity they carry on the battlefield. These soldiers are seen as disciplined, resilient, and capable of holding the hardest positions under fire. By presenting the 225th as an elite force, Ukraine builds a story of strength that inspires its people and signals to its enemies that the fight will not be easy. Every step this regiment takes is framed as decisive, turning ordinary battles into proof of their determination. On a narrow rural road bordered by thick tree lines, silence turns into chaos. Two American-made Bradley fighting vehicles roll forward, their tracks crushing the dirt beneath them. Suddenly, the M242 Bushmaster autocannons roar, flashes of fire cutting into Russian positions hidden in the trees. Smoke rises, soil explodes, and soldiers scramble for cover as the Bradleys unleash their storm of steel. The footage reveals the raw intensity of close combat. Smoke drifts across the road, muzzle flashes illuminate the tree line, and the Bradleys grind forward without hesitation. Each burst of firepower pushes the Russian infantry deeper into retreat, their positions collapsing under the armored assault. This is no distant artillery duel. This is face-to-face warfare where survival hangs by seconds. As the guns fall silent, the commentary makes a bold declaration: Russian control over the village of Voron has collapsed. According to the video, the Ukrainian push succeeded here. Yet this claim carries no official confirmation. It rests on imagery and interpretation, not verified reports. For viewers, it sparks both hope and uncertainty. Was this a decisive turning point, or just one fleeting clash in a much larger war? As the smoke clears and the echoes of cannon fire fade, the video makes a dramatic claim: Russian control of the small village of Voron is over. The narration presents this as a turning point, suggesting that Ukrainian forces, backed by the Bradleys, have broken the enemy's grip on this key point of the map. For the audience, it feels like watching history unfold in real time. But here lies the uncertainty. While the footage looks convincing, no official confirmation has been released. No Ukrainian or Russian statement verifies the situation. This creates a gap between what is seen and what is known. The images tell one story, but the official silence leaves room for doubt. In modern conflict, perception often shapes reality, but the truth may remain hidden until days or weeks later. The commentary frames Voronezh as more than just a village, it becomes a symbol. If the claim is true, it highlights Ukraine's ability to resist and reclaim ground, even under relentless pressure. If it is exaggerated, it reflects the powerful role of narrative in war. Either way, the story resonates. Small places can carry big meaning, and every skirmish is presented as a battle that could tilt the balance. For viewers, the question is not just whether Voronezh was retaken, but what it represents in the broader struggle. On August 26, 2025, Ukraine's General Staff released a key update on the front line. Their statement painted a tense picture. Heavy clashes are still ongoing, but they firmly denied that Russia has captured Voronezh or surrounding areas. According to Kyiv's account, fighting continues in tree lines, near villages, and along rural roads. They acknowledged pressure, but insisted their defenses are holding. Meanwhile, independent OSINT trackers like Deep State posted updated maps. These maps show Russian forces pushing closer to border villages and gaining ground along the gray zones, though not fully taking control. In contrast, Ukrainian forces still mark Voronezh as contested, emphasizing that battles continue rather than declaring defeat. This visual contrast between maps and official words creates a layered story, one of battlefield fog and competing narratives. This clash of perspectives reflects the wider reality of war reporting. Russia claims advances deep into the borderlands, Ukraine insists control remains, and OSINT provides a middle ground, showing pressure but not total collapse. For observers, it is a puzzle. Whose version represents the truth? Every map, every statement, every clip builds a narrative. And for those living in the shadow of these villages, the reality is not politics or reports, it is survival amid constant shelling and uncertainty. Analysts observing the clashes point toward a critical weakness in Russia's offensive, a lack of sufficient armored vehicles and effective anti-armor systems. The fighting near Voronezh highlighted this gap, where Bradleys and other Ukrainian armor operated with relative freedom once Russian lines were broken. Without strong armored support or enough anti-tank weapons, Russian units often rely on artillery and infantry maneuvers, leaving them exposed when direct confrontations occur. Beyond hardware, logistics play a decisive role. Reports suggest Russian forces face supply bottlenecks, from spare parts to armored reinforcements. With equipment losses mounting and replacements slower to arrive, the effectiveness of their counterattacks is questioned. This isn't just about one village, it reflects a broader issue where sustaining long operations becomes harder with stretched supply lines and increasing attrition. This interpretation builds into a larger thesis. Russia may still have manpower, but without enough armored depth, its offensive thrusts risk stalling. The Ukrainian side capitalizes on this by deploying Western vehicles where Russian armor is weakest. Every clash becomes both a tactical fight and a test of long-term capability. In war, firepower wins battles, but logistics sustain campaigns, and the cracks in supply chains may decide outcomes more than headlines from the front. On August 15, 2025, the world turned its eyes to Alaska, where former U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin held a high-profile summit. The choice of location itself carried symbolism, a meeting point between East and West, separated by the Bering Strait yet bound by history and rivalry. Cameras captured formal handshakes, long press lines, and speeches that projected calm, but underneath, the subtext was clear: power, influence, and strategic signaling. Commentators quickly tied the summit to the ongoing battles in Ukraine. Some argued that Putin used the timing to demonstrate strength, to show his hand was not weakened by frontline struggles. Trump, on the other hand, leaned into his familiar image as a deal-maker, projecting confidence that he could negotiate where others had failed. But much of this was theater. Both leaders were speaking as much to their domestic audiences as to each other, trying to shape perceptions of control and momentum. In truth, the outcomes of the Alaska summit remain uncertain. No breakthrough agreements were signed, no ceasefire declared. What it offered instead was a stage, one that amplified narratives. For Moscow, a chance to project resilience despite battlefield challenges. For Trump, a return to the global spotlight as a power broker. For the rest of the world, the summit underscored a reality. While soldiers clash on muddy front lines in Ukraine, political leaders wage a parallel battle of perception and influence. The Bradley fighting vehicle was born out of the Cold War, when the U.S. Army realized it needed more than just tanks and troop carriers. Named after General Omar Bradley, the design combined mobility, firepower, and protection. First introduced in the early 1980s, the M2 Bradley was intended to transport infantry safely while fighting alongside tanks in high-intensity battles. It carried 6 to 7 troops, had a welded aluminum armor hull reinforced with steel plates, and was capable of speeds up to 56 km/h on road. Its role was never just about transport, it was about fighting and surviving on a battlefield dominated by Soviet armor. For nearly 4 decades, the Bradley has been updated and adapted to modern threats, from the deserts of Iraq to the forests of Eastern Europe. What makes the Bradley unique is its balance of weapons and armor. At its heart is the 25mm M242 Bushmaster autocannon, the same weapon we see tearing through tree lines in Ukraine. It can fire up to 200 rounds per minute, powerful enough to shred light vehicles, bunkers, and infantry cover. Alongside it sits a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun for close defense. But perhaps its most feared weapon is the TOW anti-tank missile launcher mounted on the side of its turret. This gives the Bradley the ability to destroy heavily armored vehicles, even tanks, from a safe distance. Its armor protection is enough to withstand small arms fire, artillery fragments, and even some RPG hits, though it has always been criticized for vulnerabilities against modern anti-tank weapons. Still, the Bradley's survivability in Iraq and now in Ukraine has proven its resilience when combined with tactics and crew training. Over time, the Bradley became more than just a vehicle, it became a symbol of American mechanized warfare. In Iraq, it provided mobile firepower for U.S. forces in cities and deserts alike. In Ukraine, it now represents Western support, a sign of advanced equipment flowing into the front lines. Its speed, armor, and weapons allow Ukrainian forces to move quickly, strike decisively, and withstand counterattacks. But the Bradley also highlights the changing face of war. Drones, precision artillery, and anti-armor missiles challenge vehicles like this more than ever before. Still, in many frontline clashes, the Bradley's presence has tipped the balance, giving Ukrainian troops a fighting chance in situations that might otherwise seem hopeless. As history shows, weapons are not just machines, they are messages. The Bradley sends one clear message. Even in a new era of warfare, armored vehicles remain powerful symbols of strength and survival. Independent trackers like Oryx have counted dozens of Bradleys damaged or destroyed in Ukraine, but numbers only tell part of the story. For every Bradley lost, many more have survived direct hits, saved crews, and continued fighting. Russian analysts often compare the Bradley to their own BMP series, highlighting weaknesses but quietly acknowledging its superior optics, firepower, and survivability. On the battlefield, the Bradley has earned respect, even from its adversaries. The Bradley vs. BMP story is more than a contest of machines, it's about adaptation. Modern wars test not only technology but also training, strategy, and willpower. The lesson is clear. Survival depends on blending old strengths with new tactics.
Coming down, let it melt and soak into my skin.